Have you ever spoken your truth, only to feel it vanish in the air as if it were never said at all? Have you ever tried to explain yourself, to share your ideas, your dreams, your fears, only to see blank faces, disinterested nods, or, worse, subtle judgment? There's a quiet terror that lives in all of us, the fear of being unheard. The fear that no matter how much we try, no matter how much we speak, our words will never reach the hearts they were meant to touch. It starts early. Maybe you remember sitting in a classroom, raising your hand, your voice trembling, only to be ignored. Or perhaps it was a conversation with a friend or family member where your thoughts seemed to drift into a void, unnoticed, unvalued. That fear doesn't leave us. It grows silently in the background, shaping the way we speak, the way we hold our thoughts back, the way we avoid confrontation, the way we shrink ourselves just to fit into the spaces others have already claimed. You might not realize it, but that fear shows up in every part of life, in meetings at work, when your ideas could change the direction of a project, but you hesitate, worried that someone will dismiss you. In relationships, when you want to express your needs or feelings, but the risk of rejection keeps your mouth sealed. In social gatherings, when you laugh along, nod along, but never truly say what's on your mind, because what if no one cares? And yet, everyone else seems to communicate effortlessly. The charismatic coworker who captivates the room, the friend whose words linger in your mind long after the conversation ends, the partner who seems to understand every nuance of your feelings without needing to ask. You watch them and wonder, why not me? Why do my words fail me when theirs seem to breathe life into every room? This fear is not just about being misunderstood, it's about existence. When your voice is silenced, even subtly, it sends a message to your subconscious that your thoughts, your opinions, your presence are somehow less important. And if you start believing that, slowly, imperceptibly, it erodes your confidence. You stop sharing. You stop taking risks. You shrink. And the tragedy is, you don't even realize it. Because this fear is subtle. It doesn't roar. It whispers. It tells you to stay quiet just one more time, to sit back just a little longer, to let someone else take the spotlight, to pick your battles, when in reality, your voice is your battle. And every time you give in, the whisper gets stronger, until one day you might wonder if anyone would notice if you stopped speaking entirely. Think about that for a moment. How much of your life, your opportunities, your connections, your love, has been shaped by the silent choices made in fear? How many conversations have you avoided? How many thoughts have remained unspoken? How many relationships have quietly frayed because the words that needed to be said were swallowed by hesitation? And yet, here you are, still breathing, still wanting to be understood, still hoping somewhere deep inside that you could be heard. That's the strange paradox of this fear. It grows in silence, but it also fuels the deepest longing in your heart, the longing to connect, to be recognized, to matter. But let me tell you something powerful. This fear is not a wall, it's a mirror. Every moment you feel unseen, ignored, or misunderstood, it's reflecting the truth that you haven't yet discovered the art of being heard. It's a signal that the way you've been communicating is incomplete, that there is a deeper layer to connection waiting for you, a layer where words are no longer weapons and silence is no longer weakness, a layer where presence, intention, and empathy create bonds stronger than any argument, stronger than any pitch, stronger than any speech. Imagine for a moment a conversation where you speak and people listen, truly listen, where your words are felt, not just heard, where your presence commands respect, not through dominance, but through attention, where fear no longer controls your tongue and hesitation no longer dictates your actions. Imagine that feeling, that freedom, that power. That is the world waiting for you beyond this fear. But first, you have to confront it.
You have to sit with it, look at it straight in the eyes, and understand it. Fear of being misunderstood is universal. Every great communicator, every inspiring leader, every person who has ever touched hearts and influenced lives has faced it. The difference is not that they were fearless. It's that they refused to let fear control their voice. They learned the rules, they discovered the subtleties, and they practiced the art. And in doing so, they turned what was once a silent prison into a bridge of connection. Here's another truth you may not realize. Fear itself can be a teacher. Every hesitation, every misstep, every awkward silence is a lesson in disguise. The fear of being misunderstood forces you to pay attention to your words, to your tone, to your intention. It pushes you to observe, to listen, to reflect. It challenges you to grow, to practice, to refine. Without fear, there is no awareness. Without struggle, there is no mastery. So as we begin this journey into the art of effective communication, I want you to remember this. The fear you feel is not a weakness. It is the first step toward mastery, the first spark of the fire that will teach you not just how to speak, but how to connect, not just how to express yourself, but how to be heard, truly heard, in every conversation, every room, every relationship. Ask yourself this: how different would your life be if fear no longer held your tongue? If every word you spoke carried the weight of your intention? If silence became a tool, not a trap? If listening became your superpower? In this moment, your silent fears are awakening you. They are whispering a challenge. They are daring you to step into the unknown, to confront the discomfort, to practice the subtle, invisible forces that turn ordinary words into extraordinary connections. Because here's the truth: fear does not disappear when you speak, but it transforms. It becomes fuel. It becomes insight. It becomes a compass guiding you toward the art of communication. And as we move forward, you'll discover that the people who inspire, influence, and leave a mark on the world are not those who never felt fear. They are those who embraced it. They listened to it. They learned from it. And then they spoke anyway, with clarity, with empathy, with power. So let's begin. Let's face the fear, peel back the layers of hesitation, and step into a world where your words no longer fail you, where your presence is felt, where your voice matters, where the art of effective communication transforms not just your conversations, but your life itself.
Think about the last time a conversation went wrong. Maybe it was small, a disagreement with a friend, a misread email, a short exchange with a coworker, or maybe it was monumental, a fight with a partner, a project lost at work, a moment that changed everything. Notice the feeling it left behind: frustration, regret, a hollow ache in your chest. That is the pain of miscommunication. Silent, subtle, but deeply real. Miscommunication is not just a lapse of words. It is a betrayal of intention. You said something, but they heard something else. You tried to explain, but the meaning slipped away. You wanted connection, but instead you met distance. And the worst part? Often you will never even fully understand what went wrong. That's the cruel paradox. The human mind is a labyrinth, and every mind interprets words through its own fears, biases, and past experiences. Imagine two people in a room, both speaking, both listening, but neither truly understanding. The words flow, the sentences collide, and yet the connection dies before it even begins. A simple misunderstanding spirals into hurt, into resentment, into walls that weren't meant to be built. And the emotional toll? It lingers far longer than the argument itself. It quietly shapes your relationships, your confidence, your sense of belonging. Every missed connection leaves a mark. Every time your words fail to convey your meaning, a small piece of your self-worth erodes. You begin to doubt yourself. You begin to question whether your thoughts are valid, whether your feelings matter,
whether your presence is enough. You start withdrawing, speaking less, staying quieter, telling yourself, maybe it's better this way. But it doesn't get better. Not automatically, because miscommunication compounds. One unspoken thought leads to another. One unclear sentence leads to another assumption. One missed emotion leads to a cascade of misread cues. Soon, what could have been a simple clarification turns into a mountain of regret. Relationships fray, opportunities vanish, and the silence becomes deafening. The truth is, miscommunication isn't just inconvenient, it's dangerous. It steals careers, breaks families, and isolates people who only wanted to be understood. Think of the arguments that started with a simple text, misunderstood tone, or poorly chosen word. Think of the people who drifted apart, not because of hate, but because neither side knew how to truly connect. And yet, in that pain, there is clarity. Miscommunication shows us exactly what we are missing. It is a mirror reflecting the gaps between intention and understanding. It asks the hardest questions. Do you truly know yourself? Do you truly see others? Are your words alive with meaning, or are they empty sounds floating in the void? Every failed conversation is a lesson waiting to be learned. Every misunderstanding is an opportunity to grow. But it requires courage. The courage to face the discomfort, to admit mistakes, to listen harder, to speak more thoughtfully. It requires the humility to realize that even the most carefully chosen words can falter if your awareness and empathy are absent. Consider this. Two people can read the same sentence and walk away with completely different experiences. One feels connection, one feels rejection. One feels respect, one feels contempt. Words are not magic. They are vessels, and the meaning they carry depends not just on what you intend, but on what the other person receives. That is the hidden power and danger of communication. It is never just about you. It is about the space between you and another human being, a space filled with perception, memory, emotion, and interpretation. And when that space is ignored, when it is taken for granted, pain emerges. Miscommunication is the inevitable outcome. Think back to a time you've been misunderstood. Notice how your mind replays the scene, dissecting every word, every pause, every glance. Maybe you blame the other person. Maybe you blame yourself. Maybe you blame circumstance. But the reality is simpler. Somewhere, the message got lost, and somewhere, the connection was broken. The weight of this realization is heavy. It reminds us that human interaction is fragile, that words are deceptively simple, and that mastery over communication is not optional, it is essential. Every unheeded pause, every misinterpreted tone, every poorly framed sentence is a lesson etched into our lives, guiding us toward better understanding. And yet, despite all this pain, despite all the moments where silence or misunderstanding hurt us deeply, there is hope. There is a path forward. Miscommunication is not permanent. It is reversible. It is a puzzle that can be solved with awareness, empathy, and practice. The fractures it creates can be mended. Relationships can be repaired. Opportunities can be reclaimed. But first, you must see the pattern. You must understand the mechanisms of miscommunication, how fear, ego, and assumptions sabotage connection. You must recognize the subtle ways we push people away without meaning to, the ways our words fall short when we rely on habit instead of attention. Only then can you begin to speak in a way that reaches the heart as well as the mind. Imagine how it would feel if your words never faltered again. If every conversation left people feeling understood, respected, and valued.
Imagine the relief of no longer replaying painful exchanges in your mind, wondering what went wrong. Imagine the confidence that comes from knowing that you are not only speaking, you are connecting. That is the promise beyond the pain. Miscommunication is the shadow that teaches us the light. The moments that hurt, the words that failed, the relationships that strained, they're not punishments. They are teachers. And if you pay attention, if you reflect, if you practice, they will guide you to a place where your words carry weight, your presence carries warmth, and your connections carry meaning. So as we continue this journey, remember this. The pain of miscommunication is not a life sentence. It is a doorway. And the key to walking through it is awareness, courage, and the willingness to listen as deeply as you wish to be heard. Ask yourself, how many conversations in your life could have been transformed if you truly understood the art of connection? How many relationships could have been saved, strengthened, or deepened? How much of your potential has been muted by words that never landed? This is the challenge you face. To take the lessons of the pain, to study the failures, to embrace the discomfort, and to step into a world where words are no longer weapons, silence is no longer weakness, and connection is no longer accidental.
Have you ever noticed how some people can enter a room and command attention without speaking a word? How their mere presence seems to pull others in, making every word they eventually say feel deliberate, magnetic, unforgettable. It almost feels unfair, like they've discovered a secret that the rest of us missed. And in a way, they have. The secret is not in what they say, but in what they don't. Silence is their canvas, and every pause, every measured breath, every still moment carries meaning far beyond the ordinary. It is in silence that real communication is born, in the spaces between words where understanding takes root. And most people never see it, because we are obsessed with filling the air with sound, with proving ourselves, with asserting presence through talking rather than being. Think about it. How often do we talk just to avoid discomfort, just to prove we exist, just to ensure that no one thinks we are weak or uninformed? And in that rush to speak, we miss the deeper truth. The real power is not in the volume of your voice, but in the weight of your attention, in the way you make someone feel heard, safe, and valued. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is not weakness. Silence is not absence. Silence is the space where understanding grows. It is the place where empathy begins, where trust is built, where real human connection emerges. Yet so many of us fear silence. We fill it with chatter, with meaningless words, with nervous energy, because the quiet forces us to confront something deeper: ourselves. What would happen if you learned to embrace that quiet, if you discovered that saying less, truly listening, pausing, reflecting, could give your words more weight than ever before? The answer is profound. Your presence becomes magnetic. People don't just hear you, they feel you. They are drawn into your thoughts, your rhythm, your calm authority. Consider the conversations you've had in your life. How many ended in misunderstandings because no one truly listened? How many arguments escalated simply because someone failed to pause, failed to reflect, failed to acknowledge the unspoken emotions swirling in the room? And now imagine the opposite. Conversations where every word lands, where every pause amplifies understanding, where listening itself becomes a form of connection. That is the power of silence. But silence alone is not enough. It must be intentional. It must be paired with awareness. The people who master this art are not simply quiet. They are conscious. They observe, they note, they sense the unspoken. They understand that humans speak in layers: words, tone, body language, pauses, and energy. And in the quiet, they gather all these signals, turning them into insight. There is a hidden rhythm to communication, a cadence that most of us ignore. Most conversations are noise, random words bouncing off random minds, lost before they reach the heart. But the masters of influence know that the real conversation happens in the spaces in between, in the listening, in the observing, in the stillness. Think of the last time someone truly listened to you. not just nodded along while waiting to reply, not just gave the social cues of the tension, but actually listened, felt your words, felt your meaning, felt your emotion. How did that feel? Powerful, right? Liberating, validating. You didn't need to prove yourself, you didn't need to convince them. Your truth landed because someone created the space for it to land. That is the first lesson silence teaches us. Presence is stronger than words. And yet, so few understand this. Most of us are trapped in a cycle of talking over others, interrupting, seeking validation, seeking dominance, seeking approval. We chase the idea that speaking more equals being understood. But in truth, it is exactly the opposite. Speaking less, listening more, observing, pausing, reflecting, these are the tools of influence, of leadership, of lasting connection. Silence also carries emotional weight. A pause at the right moment can dissolve tension. A thoughtful gesture can communicate more than pages of explanation. A patient listen can calm anger more than any argument. In silence, meaning is amplified. And here is the most fascinating part: the quieter you are, the more you notice. The more you notice, the more you understand. The more you understand, the more precise, deliberate, and resonant your words become when you finally speak. Consider this idea. Every person you meet is speaking constantly, in words, in gestures, in body language, in tone. Most of us are deaf to these signals because we are busy formulating our next sentence, defending our ego, projecting our own fears. But if you learn to truly observe, truly sense, truly reflect, you tap into the invisible currents beneath the conversation. You begin to navigate not just the words, but the emotions, the motivations, the desires, the unspoken truths that actually drive human behavior. That is influence. That is connection. That is art. And here is the paradox. The less you try to control, the more control you actually gain. The less you fill the room with words, the more impact your words carry. The more you listen, the more people listen to you. The more still you become, the more alive your presence feels. The more you embrace silence, the more powerful your communication becomes. It is not easy. Our brains are wired for noise. Our culture rewards talking over reflection. Our instincts push us to respond, to react, to assert. But those who succeed in communication, in building trust, in inspiring, in leading, in connecting deeply, have learned to fight those impulses. They have learned to cultivate inner stillness, patience, and awareness. They have discovered the invisible rules of human connection, and they apply them with consistency, subtlety, and grace. Ask yourself this: how often do you really listen in a conversation? Not thinking of what to say next, not planning your rebuttal, not judging, not analyzing, but simply listening with your full attention. How often do you allow silence to speak, to carry the weight of your intention? How often do you step into a conversation and sense before speaking, feel before reacting, reflect before responding? These are not small skills. These are life-altering skills. Mastering them can transform your relationships, your career, your influence, your sense of self. It is the secret most people overlook because it is subtle, invisible, and counterintuitive, but the impact is profound. Silence, attention, and awareness are the foundation on which extraordinary communication is built. And now, as you sit with this idea, you may begin to sense something shifting. Perhaps you are noticing the gaps in your own conversations, the missed opportunities, the unspoken truths. Perhaps you feel the stirrings of curiosity, a desire to see how different your life could be if you embraced silence, not as emptiness, but as power. Perhaps you feel a quiet excitement, a spark that whispers, "There is a way to be heard, understood, and remembered, if only I learned to listen first." That spark is your invitation. That spark is the first step into the art of effective communication. Beyond the pain of miscommunication, beyond the fear of being misunderstood, lies a world where silence is your ally, observation is your strategy, and connection is your reward. And as we move forward, you will begin to uncover the subtle mechanics that turn silence into influence, observation into insight, and listening into leadership. You will discover that the spaces between words are not empty, they are alive with potential. And the more you learn to navigate them, the more your presence, your voice, and your relationships will transform.
Have you ever spoken your mind and felt the words evaporate before they landed? Have you ever carefully chosen your phrases only to see them twisted, misinterpreted, or ignored? You're not imagining it. Words fail us more often than we realize, and the reasons are not always obvious. The first reason is simple. Human perception is subjective. Every person interprets reality through their own lens, shaped by past experiences, fears, desires, and beliefs. You may say, "I'm fine," and they hear, "I don't care." You may offer advice, and they hear criticism. You may express love, and they hear obligation. Words are vessels, but the water they carry is always filtered through the listener's mind. Second, emotions distort clarity. When we are anxious, angry, or frustrated, our words take on unintended tones. Even calm words can be interpreted as harsh if the listener is primed for conflict. Tone, pace, and subtle emphasis matter more than the words themselves. Yet so few of us pay attention. We think we are speaking, but we are leaving our meaning to chance. Third, we overestimate the listener's understanding. We assume they know our context, our history, our intentions. We forget that the other person only sees what we present in the moment. Misunderstandings emerge when our internal world collides with their limited perspective. Every word becomes a potential point of friction, a tiny misalignment that can grow into tension, resentment, or silence. Consider social media, a digital magnifier of miscommunication. Texts, posts, comments, stripped of tone, gesture, and nuance, can be perceived in countless ways we never intended. A joke becomes offense. A compliment becomes condescension. And in real life, the same principles apply. We fail to convey what we mean because human communication is more than text and speech. It's emotional, it's layered, it's multidimensional. And yet most of us approach it as if it were simple. Even our intentions can betray us. We want to inspire, persuade, or comfort, but our words carry subconscious signals: ego, defensiveness, impatience, fear. These hidden currents influence how our message is received more than the message itself. You may speak truth, but if your fear seeps through, your listener senses it. You may offer guidance, but if your ego is heavy, your words fall flat. Every conversation is a blend of conscious intention and unconscious signals, and if the latter is unbalanced, communication fails. And here's another subtle trap: the assumption of shared meaning. We think words mean the same thing to others as they do to us, but a single word can evoke different emotions, images, and associations for each person. Success, love, freedom. They sound simple, but they carry infinite interpretations. Misalignment here is almost guaranteed, and it is often invisible until conflict arises. Cognitive biases play their part too. Humans are wired to hear what confirms their beliefs and ignore what challenges them. Even the clearest explanation can be filtered through defense mechanisms, selective attention, or preconceived notions. You may be trying to connect, but your listener is filtering, judging, anticipating, and reacting, often unconsciously. The fault is rarely one-sided. Communication is a shared responsibility, yet it only works when both parties are fully present and aware. Fear is another culprit. Fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of conflict. It creeps into our tone, our word choice, and our pauses. You may hold back key points to avoid confrontation, soften your message until it loses meaning, or speak cautiously until your impact is diluted. And the listener senses it. Words without confidence, without clarity, without conviction often land weakly, or not at all. Even clarity itself can betray us. We try to be precise, logical, or persuasive, and in doing so, we over-explain, over-justify, or complicate our message. We drown our intention in detail, and the listener can't extract the essence. Less often, we under-explain,
assuming understanding where none exists. Both extremes lead to failure. The right balance, simplicity, emotion, and intention is elusive and rarely achieved by accident. We also fail because we confuse speaking with communicating. Speaking is merely producing words. Communicating is ensuring those words create understanding. You can be eloquent, articulate, and intelligent and still fail to connect. Words are meaningless without context, presence, and empathy. You can give a brilliant speech and people can walk away untouched, while a single heartfelt sentence delivered with presence can leave an indelible mark. And the consequences are more serious than you might think. Miscommunication erodes trust. It fuels conflict. It creates distance between friends, colleagues, and lovers. Every time a message is misunderstood, a little gap opens in the bond between two people. Over time, these gaps accumulate into walls. And once walls are built, words alone cannot tear them down. Yet here lies the silver lining. Understanding why words fail is the first step to mastering communication. Once you see the patterns, the influence of perception, emotion, bias, fear, and intent, you can begin to speak differently. You can learn to craft words with precision, deliver them with awareness, and pair them with presence that reinforce meaning. You can move from ineffective chatter to transformative conversation. Ask yourself, how many opportunities have you missed because your words didn't land? How many relationships have been strained or even lost because the gap between intention and perception was never bridged? How many times have you regretted what you said or didn't say because you failed to account for the invisible currents that shape every interaction? Every misstep is a lesson. Every misunderstanding is an invitation to grow. The mechanics of why words fail are not obstacles. They are guides. They point you toward a deeper understanding of human connection. They reveal the subtle art hidden beneath ordinary conversation. And this is where mastery begins. Once you comprehend the forces that undermine your words, you gain the power to overcome them. You learn that words alone are insufficient. You need empathy, awareness, timing, and presence. You discover that communication is not about speaking more, but about speaking right. Not about being heard, but about being felt. So, as you reflect on these failures, the words lost, the conversations misfired, the connections frayed, let it fuel your curiosity. Let it push you to observe more, listen deeper, and speak with intention. Let it awaken you to the hidden layers of communication that most people never notice, much less master. Because when you finally understand why words fail, you no longer fear miscommunication. You no longer stumble through conversations hoping to be understood. You start to wield your words deliberately, subtly, and powerfully. And that is the doorway to influence, connection, and mastery of the art of communication.
Have you ever felt completely invisible in a conversation? Not because the other person was speaking over you, but because they weren't truly listening. There's a unique pain in that experience, the kind that silently erodes your confidence, makes your thoughts feel unworthy, and leaves a hollow ache where connection should have been. Yet most of us are guilty of the same. We listen to reply, not to understand. We nod absent-mindedly, while our minds rehearse our next sentence. We think we are engaged, but in reality, we are losing the very essence of human connection: attention. Listening is not a passive act. It is not simply waiting for your turn to speak. It is a skill, a discipline, a power that most people overlook. And here's the paradox. The better you listen, the more influence you wield. The more attention you give, the more respect you earn. The more you truly understand, the more deeply you connect. Think about it for a moment.
How often have you opened up to someone and felt lighter just because they were fully present, not because they offered solutions or advice, but because they heard you? They absorbed your words, your tone, your emotions. They let your feelings settle in their awareness. And in that act of presence, you felt seen, validated, understood. That is listening at its highest form, the kind that transforms relationships, dissolves tension, and builds trust that words alone could never create. Most people underestimate the power of silence in listening. When you allow a pause after someone speaks, you give them space to explore deeper truths. When you resist the urge to interrupt or interject, you allow their emotions to surface fully. When you focus on their energy, their subtle cues, their hesitation and emphasis, you grasp layers of meaning hidden beneath the words. Listening is the art of perceiving what is unsaid, of understanding the unspoken, of decoding the invisible signals that define every conversation. And yet, this is where fear and ego often sabotage us. Fear pushes us to respond too quickly, to assert ourselves, to dominate the narrative. Ego tempts us to prioritize being right over being understanding. We listen half-heartedly while preparing rebuttals, explanations, or defenses. We think we are participating, but in reality, we are obstructing connection. And every time we do this, relationships suffer, opportunities slip away, and influence diminishes. Now, imagine a different approach. Imagine entering a conversation with one simple objective: to understand. To not just hear words, but to feel the meaning behind them. To sense the emotion, the intention, the subtle shifts in energy. To hold back judgment and absorb information fully before responding. This is not easy. It requires patience. It requires humility. It requires presence. But the results are extraordinary. People instinctively gravitate toward those who truly listen. They trust more. They open up more. They value your presence more. Listening is also the antidote to miscommunication. When you listen actively, you notice discrepancies, clarify assumptions, and catch misunderstandings before they escalate. You build bridges before gaps form. You transform conflict into understanding. You create a space where words are not weapons, but instruments of connection. Consider the leaders, influencers, and remarkable communicators you admire. What sets them apart is rarely the number of words they speak. It is their capacity to listen, their ability to make people feel heard, validated, and understood. They listen with intention, presence, and empathy. They know that influence is earned not by speaking more, but by understanding more. And here's a subtle but powerful insight. Listening is a mirror of self-mastery. To listen fully, you must quiet your own thoughts, your own judgments, your own impulses. You must suspend your need to respond or control the conversation. You must turn inward to stay grounded, while turning outward to fully perceive. This is not just a communication skill. It is a practice of emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and mindfulness. Ask yourself, how often do you truly listen? How often do you enter a conversation fully present, without distraction, without agenda, without anticipation? How often do you allow the other person's words to sink in, to resonate, to guide your response rather than being filtered through your fears, biases, or assumptions? Most people rarely do this, yet it is the key to mastery. And there's another layer. Listening empowers you even when you remain silent. When someone feels fully heard, you gain influence naturally. People trust your judgment, value your input, and seek your guidance, not because you demand it, but because you have earned it through attention, empathy and presence. Listening is the quiet engine of authority, connection, and respect. Furthermore, listening teaches patience. It teaches timing. It teaches restraint. How many conversations have gone wrong because someone spoke too soon, reacted too quickly, or failed to perceive the underlying emotions? Listening trains you to pause, to reflect, to respond with intention rather than reaction. It transforms impulsive speech into deliberate communication. It allows you to navigate tense situations, resolve conflicts, and deepen relationships in ways words alone cannot achieve. And yet the most profound truth about listening is this: it is an act of generosity. To listen fully, without judgment or interruption, is to give someone the most valuable gift imaginable: your attention, your presence, your acknowledgement. And in giving this gift, you create a ripple that returns to you tenfold: deeper trust, greater respect, stronger bonds, and more meaningful influence. Every time you listen with purpose, you shift the dynamics of the conversation. You turn fear into safety, confusion into clarity, frustration into understanding. You make words land with impact. You transform silence into a conduit for connection. And most importantly, you model the behavior that others will mirror: attentive, thoughtful, present communication that elevates every interaction. Consider the unspoken opportunities you've missed. Conversations where a simple act of listening could have prevented conflict, healed tension, or sparked collaboration. Situations where being heard would have transformed a relationship or unlocked a chance that was otherwise lost. Now imagine reclaiming those moments in the future, harnessing listening as your superpower, your secret weapon, your art form. And this is what separates ordinary communicators from extraordinary ones. Ordinary communicators speak. Extraordinary communicators listen. They understand that words are only as powerful as the attention they receive. They recognize that influence, connection, and trust are built in silence, in observation, in presence. They wield listening as a tool of transformation for themselves and for everyone they engage with. And so, as you reflect on the conversations in your life, consider this: the most profound changes, the deepest connections, the moments that leave a lasting impact are rarely the result of words alone. They are the result of listening, truly, deeply, intentionally. And now, as we continue this journey into the art of effective communication, you will begin to explore the invisible architecture behind every conversation, the emotional, psychological, and energetic forces that shape how words are received, understood, and remembered. Listening is the first key. The next steps will unlock the doors that transform ordinary speech into extraordinary connection.
Have you ever left a conversation feeling unsettled, even though nothing wrong was said? Maybe the words were fine, polite, or even positive, but something about the exchange felt off. A tension, a coldness, an unspoken disconnection. That feeling is the emotional architecture of communication at work. Words are just one layer. Beneath them lies a complex web of emotion, energy, and intent that shapes every interaction. Communication is not just logical, it is profoundly emotional. Humans do not respond purely to facts or arguments. We respond to feelings. We respond to energy. We respond to how someone makes us feel in the moment their words touch us. And yet most of us ignore this dimension entirely, focusing only on content, while the emotional undercurrents quietly sabotage our intentions. Consider tone, for example. Two people can say the same words,
I care about you, I need your help, you were wrong, and each will be received completely differently depending on how they are delivered. Tone conveys nuance, sincerity, urgency, warmth, or coldness. It is a subtle but critical instrument, far more powerful than the words themselves. People remember tone long after they forget the words. A warm, empathetic tone can heal misunderstandings. A harsh, impatient tone can fracture relationships instantly. Empathy is the second layer of this emotional architecture. To communicate effectively, you must understand not just what is said, but how the other person feels. Empathy is not sympathy, and it is not agreement. It is perception. Sensing the emotional landscape, understanding the pressures, insecurities, and needs of the person before you. Without empathy, words are shots in the dark. With empathy, they are bridges that connect, influence, and transform. Energy is another invisible force. Every conversation carries energy, whether we're conscious of it or not. Nervousness, tension, confidence, calm, excitement. These are not invisible. They are absorbed by the listener, shaping their perception of every word. You can speak the most brilliant sentence, but if your energy communicates doubt, hesitation, or impatience, your message loses its impact. Conversely, a calm, confident, and emotionally attuned energy can make even simple statements resonate profoundly. Emotional architecture also includes pacing and rhythm. How quickly you speak, how often you pause, how you vary emphasis. These elements structure the emotional flow of your communication. Rapid, rushed speech can create anxiety or confusion. Long, deliberate pauses can create suspense, clarity, or reflection. A shift in rhythm can signal importance, empathy, or urgency. Mastering these nuances is what separates ordinary talk from communication that leaves a lasting impression. Now let's consider the invisible feedback loop. Humans unconsciously mirror emotions. If you communicate with anger, impatience, or frustration, the other person is likely to mirror it too, subtly. If you communicate calm, attentiveness, and openness, they mirror that too. Emotion begets emotion. Energy begets energy. Words alone are insufficient. The invisible emotional signals determine how your message lands and whether it resonates or rebounds. Even your posture, gestures, and eye contact are part of this architecture. Communication is multidimensional. It is not confined to speech. Your body communicates, often more powerfully than your mouth. Leaning forward with openness conveys interest. Crossing your arms or avoiding gaze signals detachment or defensiveness. Synchronizing verbal, tonal, and physical cues aligns your message, creating coherence and trust. Misalignment, on the other hand, breeds confusion and mistrust. And here's a subtle truth. The emotional architecture of communication is often more important than the words themselves. People may forget what you said, but they will not forget how you made them feel. Your ability to navigate this emotional layer determines the depth, quality, and effectiveness of your communication. Ask yourself, how often have your words failed despite being carefully chosen? How often has someone misunderstood you even when you were correct or clear? The reason is almost always hidden in the emotional dynamics: tone, empathy, energy, rhythm, body language, and awareness. Words are just the surface. The real conversation happens in the emotional currents beneath. And here lies the opportunity. Mastering the emotional architecture allows you to shape not just what people hear, but what they feel. You gain the ability to inspire, calm, influence, and connect in ways that words alone cannot achieve. It transforms communication from mechanical expression into art, subtle, intuitive, and profoundly human. Imagine a conversation where every word, every pause, every gesture, every nuance aligns with your intent, where your tone conveys sincerity, empathy, and confidence, where your energy invites trust and openness, where the rhythm and pacing guide understanding and reflection. In such conversations, misunderstandings vanish, connections deepen, and influence becomes effortless. This mastery does not come naturally. It requires self-awareness, reflection, and practice. You must learn to read the emotional landscape of each interaction. You must observe your own energy, tone, and gestures. You must refine the invisible cues that amplify or undermine your message. And you must practice the discipline of responding intentionally, not reacting impulsively to the emotional feedback of the other person. Consider this. The people who inspire, lead, and influence effortlessly are masters of emotional architecture. They understand that a simple correction delivered with empathy leaves a person motivated. A suggestion given with impatience leaves them defensive. They understand that their energy, not just their words, determines impact. They know how to pace conversations to create trust, curiosity, and clarity. They craft messages that resonate not just in the mind, but in the heart. And here's the most important insight. You can learn these skills. Emotional intelligence, tone awareness, presence, pacing, empathy. These are not innate talents reserved for a lucky few. They are learnable, practicable, and improvable. With dedication, observation, and mindful repetition, you can transform ordinary conversations into profound human experiences. Ask yourself, how would your relationships change if every conversation conveyed your intention accurately? How would your career transform if you could influence without coercion, inspire without force, and connect without misunderstanding? How would your life shift if you could navigate the invisible emotional currents with confidence, awareness, and precision? The truth is, the emotional architecture of communication is the key to unlocking influence, trust, and connection. Words alone are fragile. Intention alone is invisible. Knowledge alone is ineffective. But when aligned with tone, empathy, energy, and presence, words become vessels of transformation. Conversations become bridges. Relationships become deep, resilient, and meaningful. Influence becomes effortless. As we move forward in this journey, keep this in mind. Mastering the emotional architecture is not optional. It is the foundation on which all other communication skills are built. Listening, presence, empathy, tone, rhythm, and energy. These elements determine whether your words land, whether your connections thrive, and whether your influence endures. Every conversation you have is a test of your awareness, emotional intelligence, and alignment. Every interaction is an opportunity to refine your mastery, to build trust, to inspire, to connect. And those who succeed are not simply eloquent speakers. They are emotionally attuned communicators who understand that the invisible forces behind their words shape every outcome. Your journey to mastery continues, and the lessons you are learning now will allow you to transform not just your words, but your presence, your relationships, and your life itself.
Have you ever left a conversation feeling more confused than when it began? Maybe someone was explaining something important, but their words were tangled, rushed, or abstract. You nodded along, pretending to understand, only to realize later that you were lost. That confusion, that frustration, that silent regret, it's a pain we've all experienced. And it happens because clarity is missing. Words alone are not enough. They must be organized, precise, and purposeful. Clarity is the bridge between intention and understanding.
Without it, even the most sincere words can be misinterpreted. Even the most important messages can fall flat. Even the strongest ideas can be lost in translation. Communication without clarity is like a light trying to shine through fog. Its power diminishes, its direction is uncertain, and its impact is muted. So what does clarity really mean? It means structuring your thoughts before you speak. It means stripping away unnecessary complexity and focusing on the essence of what you want to convey. It means choosing words carefully, crafting sentences deliberately, and delivering your message with intention. Clarity is not about oversimplifying. It is about illuminating. It is the art of making your meaning unmistakable without overwhelming the listener. Think about moments when you've been deeply understood. How did it feel? Empowering? Validating? Liberating? You didn't have to struggle to convey meaning. The message landed effortlessly. That is the power of clarity. It is a gift to the listener and a tool of influence for the speaker. It transforms ideas into understanding, conversations into connection, and instructions into action. Clarity also requires precision. Words are powerful, but they are also fragile. A single poorly chosen term can distort meaning, create confusion, or even provoke unintended emotions. To communicate effectively, you must understand the exact weight and nuance of each word. You must anticipate how it will be received, and you must align your language with the listener's frame of reference. Precision ensures your intention matches the perception, eliminating the gap where miscommunication thrives. Another crucial element of clarity is structure. Thoughts must follow a logical, intuitive flow. Ideas should be organized in a way that builds understanding step by step, guiding the listener from concept to conclusion without unnecessary detours. Think of your message as a path through a forest. Clarity is the trail, guiding the listener safely and confidently to the destination. Without structure, ideas wander, get lost, or collide, leaving confusion in their wake. And timing matters too. Clarity is amplified when you pace your delivery according to the listener's ability to absorb information. Too fast, and the message overwhelms. Too slow, and attention drifts. Pauses, repetition, and emphasis are not optional. They are tools that reinforce meaning and create moments for comprehension. The rhythm of your speech can determine whether understanding occurs instantly or only after reflection, sometimes never. Consider storytelling, one of the most powerful tools for clarity. Stories organize complex ideas into memorable sequences. They anchor abstract concepts in relatable experiences. They provide context, emotion, and meaning in ways that direct explanation cannot. When clarity meets storytelling, communication becomes magnetic, memorable, and deeply impactful. A story conveys not just information, but insight, perspective, and resonance. Emotional clarity is equally important. It's not just what you say, but what the listener feels. Are your words aligned with your energy, your tone, and your intent? Are they free of hidden tension, fear, or frustration that could cloud understanding? Emotional clarity ensures that your message is not just intellectually received, but emotionally comprehended. It bridges the gap between thought and feeling, mind and heart. Ask yourself, how often have your words been misunderstood not because the content was wrong, but because the delivery was unclear? How often have opportunities slipped away simply because your message didn't land with precision and impact? Most communication failures are not due to a lack of knowledge, but to a lack of clarity. And the good news is, clarity is learnable, trainable, and improvable.
One method to achieve clarity is simplification. Strip away jargon, filler, and distractions. Focus on the core idea. Ask yourself, if I could only say one thing, what is the most important point? Then build around that anchor. Simplification does not mean dumbing down. It means making your message accessible, digestible, and unmistakable. The simpler the core, the stronger the impact. Another method is visualization. Words paired with imagery create instant understanding. When a listener can picture your idea, they absorb it faster and remember it longer. Metaphors, analogies, and examples are not embellishments. They are instruments of clarity. They transform abstract ideas into tangible understanding. Repetition is also a subtle but powerful tool. Reinforcing key points, emphasizing critical ideas, and summarizing essential messages ensures that meaning is reinforced without becoming tedious. Done strategically, repetition creates confidence, comprehension, and retention. Done poorly, it becomes redundancy. Clarity requires precision in repetition as well. Finally, feedback is essential. Clarity is tested in real time. Observe reactions, notice confusion, listen for questions, and adjust accordingly. Effective communicators are not rigid. They are responsive. They refine, adapt, and calibrate to ensure their message is understood exactly as intended. This feedback loop transforms communication from a one-way broadcast into a dynamic, living exchange of ideas. Imagine the possibilities when clarity becomes your habit. Conversations that once frustrated you now flow effortlessly. Misunderstandings shrink, conflicts resolve faster, and trust deepens. Your words become tools of influence, connection, and inspiration. People remember you not just for what you said, but for how clearly, powerfully, and meaningfully you said it. Every great leader, influencer, and communicator prioritizes clarity. They recognize that brilliance without clarity is wasted potential. Knowledge without clarity is powerless. Passion without clarity is noise. Mastery comes when content, intention, and delivery converge seamlessly, creating messages that resonate instantly and endure. So, as you reflect on your own conversations, ask yourself, how often do you strive for clarity in your words, structure, and delivery? How often do you consider the listener's perception, their emotional absorption, and their ability to follow your ideas? Clarity is not an accident. It is a deliberate practice that transforms ordinary speech into extraordinary connection. And now, as we move forward, you will explore how clarity, listening, presence, and emotional awareness combine into a communication style that is not just effective, but unforgettable. The art of effective communication is no longer about talking more, but about speaking, listening, and connecting with precision, intention, and resonance.
Have you ever spoken to someone and felt completely disconnected, as if your words bounced off an invisible wall? Perhaps you tried to persuade, advise, or encourage, yet the response was lukewarm or defensive. That moment of disconnect is a powerful reminder that influence is not about what you say, it's about whether the other person feels understood. And that is where empathy comes in. Empathy is the invisible force that transforms ordinary communication into extraordinary influence. It is the ability to sense another person's emotions, intentions, and perspective, and respond in a way that honors their experience. Empathy is not agreeing or condoning, it is perceiving and validating. It is the bridge between your words and their impact,
the secret ingredient that turns conversations into connections, ideas into resonance, and guidance into transformation. Consider the people in your life who leave a lasting impression. What makes them unforgettable is rarely their intelligence, their eloquence, or their knowledge. It is their ability to make you feel seen, heard, and understood. They have mastered the art of emotional resonance, tuning into your world while speaking from theirs. That is the subtle power of empathy. Empathy begins with listening. Active, conscious listening is not merely waiting for your turn to speak, it is immersing yourself fully in the other person's experience. Notice their words, tone, pauses, gestures, and energy. Sense the emotions that ripple beneath their surface. Recognize the fears, hopes, and motivations driving their thoughts. In this attentive space, understanding blossoms, and your words gain precision, weight, and impact. Without empathy, communication is transactional. Words are exchanged, information is passed, but connection is absent. Misunderstandings flourish, conflicts escalate, and influence diminishes. People may comply superficially, but their hearts remain closed. Empathy unlocks the emotional door, inviting trust, cooperation, and authentic engagement. Empathy also enhances persuasion. Consider this. When you understand someone's perspective, you can frame your ideas in ways that resonate deeply with their needs, values, and emotions. You anticipate objections before they arise. You address fears subtly, without confrontation. You communicate in their language, not just your own. Influence is no longer coercion. It becomes alignment, collaboration, and shared understanding. Think of empathy as a mirror. It reflects not only what the other person feels, but also the emotional tone of your interaction. Are you anxious, impatient, or defensive? They will sense it. Are you calm, attentive, and open? They will mirror that as well. Empathy guides not only your words, but your energy, tone, and presence, ensuring that your communication lands harmoniously. Moreover, empathy is a tool for conflict resolution. Most disputes escalate not because of facts, but because emotions go unacknowledged. When you validate feelings, you reduce tension. When you see beyond the surface, you discover common ground. When you respond with understanding, resistance melts and cooperation emerges naturally. Empathy is the lubricant that smooths the friction inherent in human interaction. And here is a critical insight. Empathy requires courage. It demands that you set aside ego, judgment, and defensiveness. It challenges you to prioritize understanding over being right, connection over validation, influence over control. Many avoid empathy because it's uncomfortable. It exposes vulnerability, requires patience, and sometimes forces confrontation with perspectives that differ from our own. Yet the rewards are profound. Influence, trust, and deep connection are born in that space of courageous understanding. Ask yourself, how often do you respond with empathy in your conversations? How often do you seek to truly feel what the other person is experiencing before offering your perspective? How often do you notice subtle emotional cues that guide your choice of words, tone, and timing? These are not minor adjustments. They are the essence of transformative communication. Empathy also creates alignment between intent and perception. You can speak with the clearest words and the most carefully chosen phrases, but without empathy, your intent may be misread. By sensing emotional context, you calibrate your message so that it lands exactly as intended. Your words no longer risk misinterpretation. Your message becomes a living bridge connecting mind and heart. Furthermore, empathy strengthens trust. Humans instinctively respond to those who understand them. When someone senses genuine understanding, they lower defenses, share openly, and engage sincerely. Empathy signals safety, respect, and authenticity, the foundational ingredients of influence. Trust, once built, allows your words to carry far greater weight than authority, persuasion, or logic alone ever could. Imagine a world where every interaction you have is infused with empathy. Arguments transform into dialogues. Instructions become inspiration. Feedback becomes guidance. Influence becomes natural, effortless, and sustainable. Relationships deepen, collaboration flourishes, and your presence commands attention, not through volume or force, but through resonance, understanding, and connection. Empathy is also cumulative. Every act of understanding builds a foundation for future influence. Every moment someone feels truly seen strengthens trust. Every interaction guided by awareness reinforces connection. Over time, empathy creates a reputation, a gravitational pull, and a network of relationships grounded in respect and mutual understanding. And here is the paradox. In giving attention, understanding, and care, you gain influence. In focusing on their world, your impact grows. In listening deeply and responding thoughtfully, you command authority without asserting dominance. Empathy transforms ordinary communication into leadership, ordinary presence into magnetism, and ordinary influence into enduring impact. Ask yourself, how would your life change if every conversation you had was infused with empathy? How would your relationships deepen? How would your career advance? How would your influence expand if you consistently connected with the hearts behind the words? The answer is simple, yet profound. Empathy amplifies every other communication skill, turning knowledge, clarity, and presence into lasting impact. So as we continue this journey into the art of effective communication, remember this: empathy is not optional. It is the foundation. It is the secret force that transforms words into connection, intention into perception, and interaction into influence. Every pause, every question, every carefully chosen phrase is amplified when guided by empathy. Every misunderstanding avoided, every relationship strengthened, every opportunity seized rests upon this invisible but powerful principle. Your next step is to integrate empathy with everything you've learned: listening, presence, clarity, emotional awareness, to communicate not just effectively, but profoundly. The true heart of communication is not in speaking louder, faster, or more persuasively. It is in feeling, sensing, and connecting. And empathy is the compass that ensures your words and energy always reach the heart.
Have you ever listened to someone speak and felt captivated, hanging on every word, even when the topic wasn't inherently exciting? Chances are they were telling a story. Stories have a magnetic pull that facts alone can never achieve. They engage the mind, stir emotions, and create experiences that linger long after the words are spoken. Yet few people recognize that storytelling is not just entertainment, it is a core tool of influence, persuasion, and connection. Why are stories so powerful? Humans are wired for narrative. From childhood, we absorb the world through stories, fairy tales, fables, anecdotes, and legends. Stories give meaning to abstract concepts, create context for complex ideas, and evoke emotions that facts alone cannot. They bypass the rational mind and reach directly into the heart, making ideas stick, feelings resonate, and lessons unforgettable. Influence through storytelling begins with structure. Every compelling story has a clear arc, a beginning that sets the scene, a middle that introduces conflict or challenge, and an ending that resolves tension and delivers insight. This architecture mirrors the way the human brain processes experience. It creates anticipation, curiosity, and emotional engagement, keeping listeners invested from start to finish. Consider the power of relatable characters. Stories resonate when listeners see themselves reflected in the narrative. When your audience identifies with the struggles, fears, or desires of the protagonist, they are not just observing, they are participating. Their emotions are activated, their attention is captured, and their understanding deepens. Relatability transforms a story from passive entertainment into active learning. Conflict and tension are equally essential. Every memorable story involves challenge, obstacle, or adversity. Why? Because struggle evokes emotion. It triggers empathy, curiosity, and anticipation. People lean in, waiting to see how the challenge is overcome, how lessons are learned, and how resolution is achieved. In communication, framing your message through challenge and resolution ensures engagement, retention, and emotional impact. Emotion is the currency of storytelling. Facts persuade the mind, but stories persuade the heart. When you embed emotional truths, fear, hope, longing, triumph into your narrative, you create resonance. The listener experiences the journey alongside you, internalizing lessons not through logic alone, but through feeling. Emotional storytelling amplifies understanding, retention, and influence in ways that dry exposition never can. Timing and pacing also shape storytelling impact. A well-timed pause creates suspense, allowing the listener to absorb tension before resolution. Strategic repetition emphasizes key lessons. Variation in tone and rhythm highlights moments of significance. Storytelling is not merely recounting events, it is an orchestration of attention, emotion, and anticipation. Mastery of pacing ensures your message lands powerfully and memorably. Analogies and metaphors are additional storytelling tools. They simplify complex concepts by linking them to familiar experiences. A metaphor transforms abstract principles into tangible imagery, making ideas easier to grasp, remember, and apply. The right analogy resonates instantly, bypassing resistance and creating clarity and connection simultaneously. Stories also build trust and credibility. Sharing authentic experiences, including vulnerability, mistakes, and lessons learned, humanizes you. Listeners perceive authenticity, which fosters trust. Influence is not imposed, it is earned through genuine connection. A story rooted in honesty communicates not only facts, but values, integrity, and emotional intelligence. People trust what they feel is real. Ask yourself, how often have your facts or arguments fallen flat, despite being true or compelling? How often have instructions or advice been ignored, misunderstood, or forgotten? The answer is that without narrative, messages rarely stick. Storytelling transforms mere content into an experience that resonates, engages, and endures. Even in professional contexts, storytelling is indispensable. Leaders use narrative to inspire vision, align teams, and motivate action. Entrepreneurs craft stories to engage customers, convey brand values, and build loyalty. Educators employ stories to make lessons unforgettable. In every field, those who master storytelling communicate not just effectively, but memorably and persuasively. The most powerful stories are layered with empathy, clarity, and emotional awareness, all the elements we have explored in previous modules. Empathy ensures the story resonates with the listener's world. Clarity ensures that the message is understood without confusion. Emotional architecture ensures the story engages energy, tone, and rhythm to maximize impact. When aligned, these elements transform ordinary communication into compelling, influential, and unforgettable storytelling.
Furthermore, storytelling enhances memory retention. People remember ideas presented as narratives far better than isolated facts or lists. Lessons embedded in story form are more easily recalled because they are anchored to emotions, context, and imagery. Influence through storytelling is enduring. The listener carries your message long after the conversation ends. Consider subtle techniques to amplify influence. Hook the audience early. Start with curiosity, tension, or a relatable problem. Engage attention immediately. Layer the narrative. Interweave personal insight, emotional resonance, and practical lessons. Include transformation. Demonstrate change, growth, or resolution, giving the audience a model for application. Close with reflection. Leave the listener with a lesson, question, or insight that encourages internalization and action. Imagine every conversation you have infused with storytelling. Your messages become experiences. Your advice becomes guidance. Your lessons become lessons remembered. Your presence transforms into influence that is felt, remembered, and acted upon. The ordinary exchanges of daily life, meetings, mentoring, teaching, coaching, or casual conversations are elevated into moments of connection and impact. Ask yourself, how many conversations, presentations, or meetings could have been transformed if they were framed as stories? How much more influence, engagement, and understanding could you have achieved? Storytelling is the tool that bridges intention and perception, mind and heart, information and insight. And here is the ultimate insight. The art of influence is not in speaking louder or faster, but in weaving experience, emotion, and lesson into a narrative that resonates. Storytelling allows you to communicate beyond words, beyond facts, and beyond logic. It allows you to touch, move, and transform the listener at a fundamental human level. As we move forward, keep this in mind. Influence through storytelling is a culmination of everything we have explored: clarity, empathy, emotional awareness, listening, and presence. When integrated skillfully, narrative becomes the vehicle for connection, persuasion, and transformation. Ordinary messages become unforgettable experiences. Ordinary communication becomes extraordinary influence.
Have you ever tried to convince someone of your perspective only to face resistance, defensiveness, or disinterest? You presented facts, explained your reasoning, or offered advice, yet the result was the opposite of what you intended. That frustration is all too common because true influence is rarely achieved through force, argument, or pressure. Persuasion, when done effectively, is subtle, strategic, and deeply human. It is the art of guiding others while honoring their autonomy. Persuasion without pressure begins with understanding. People are more receptive when they feel understood rather than dictated to. When you approach communication with empathy and insight, you can anticipate concerns, recognize motivations, and frame ideas in ways that resonate with the listener's priorities. Influence is not about imposing your view. It is about creating alignment between your intention and their needs, fears, and desires. One of the most powerful tools in this process is framing. How you present information shapes perception. The same message can inspire curiosity, agreement, or resistance, depending on context. Framing is not manipulation. It is clarity and relevance. It highlights benefits, addresses concerns, and positions ideas in ways that are meaningful to the listener. By framing your message thoughtfully, you guide attention and create readiness without pressure. Another essential principle is choice. People respond best when they feel empowered, not constrained. Present options, invite participation, and encourage agency. Influence is amplified when the listener feels they are making their own decision rather than being directed. Persuasion without pressure respects autonomy, creating trust and engagement that endures beyond a single conversation. Timing is equally critical. Persuasion is not a sprint, it is a process. Messages land best when the listener is emotionally and mentally ready. Pushing ideas too soon can trigger defensiveness, doubt, or resistance. Observing readiness, aligning with energy, and introducing ideas at the right moment ensures receptivity and impact. Patience is a powerful tool of influence. Stories, which we explored earlier, are central to pressure-free persuasion. A well-told narrative allows the listener to experience insight rather than being told what to think. Through story, you model perspectives, demonstrate consequences, and reveal solutions in ways that are engaging, relatable, and non-confrontational. Storytelling becomes a conduit for persuasion without pressure. The listener arrives at understanding voluntarily, guided by emotion and imagination, rather than instruction. Language also matters profoundly. The words you choose signal intention and respect. Phrases like, "Consider this perspective," or "What if we tried?" or "One approach could be," create openness and curiosity. Avoid absolutes, ultimatums, or aggressive directives. Influence thrives on invitation, not imposition. Language shapes perception, and perception shapes receptivity. Building credibility is another cornerstone. People are persuaded by those they trust, respect, and see as competent. Credibility is earned through consistency, expertise, integrity, and empathy. When your words align with your actions and your guidance comes from experience and understanding, your influence is natural and effortless. Pressure becomes unnecessary. Your presence and approach command attention and respect. Active listening remains critical in persuasion. Understanding objections, fears, and underlying motivations allows you to address concerns directly and constructively. By demonstrating that you have heard and comprehended, you reduce defensiveness and open the door to collaboration. Persuasion becomes a dialogue rather than a monologue, creating space for shared understanding and voluntary alignment. Ask yourself, how often have you tried to persuade only to encounter resistance or conflict? How often have you pushed ideas too hard only to find that the listener shut down or disengaged? Most failures in influence stem from neglecting empathy, autonomy, and readiness. Mastering persuasion without pressure changes that dynamic completely. Another subtle but powerful technique is anchoring. People are influenced by reference points, past experiences, emotions, or values. By connecting your message to what already matters to the listener, you create resonance and relevance. Anchoring ensures your ideas are not foreign or imposing. They feel natural, logical, and aligned with the listener's worldview. Consistency and patience are key. Influence rarely occurs in a single interaction. Repeated exposure, gradual alignment, and ongoing demonstration of understanding solidify trust and receptivity. Persuasion without pressure is a marathon, not a sprint. Each interaction is an opportunity to plant seeds of insight, model behavior, and guide decision-making subtly yet effectively. Nonverbal cues amplify persuasion. Your posture, gestures, tone, and energy communicate intention and confidence. Calm, open, and intentional presence signals authenticity and invites receptivity. Nonverbal alignment with your message strengthens trust and reduces resistance, ensuring your words land in harmony with perception. Even small acts of generosity and support influence naturally. By providing value, insight, or assistance without expectation, you create goodwill, gratitude, and openness. Influence flows organically when the listener feels respected, supported, and understood. Pressure becomes unnecessary. Persuasion emerges as a natural consequence of connection, trust, and alignment. Consider ethical influence as a long-term strategy. Persuasion without pressure prioritizes understanding over winning, connection over domination, and guidance over control. It transforms ordinary communication into leadership, mentorship, and authentic influence. People respond not because they are compelled, but because they are inspired, informed, and aligned. Imagine conversations where your ideas are received openly, feedback is constructive, and collaboration flows naturally. Imagine relationships where influence is earned through trust, empathy, and insight, rather than asserted through force or urgency. This is the art of persuasion without pressure: subtle, ethical, effective, and sustainable. Ask yourself, how would your life change if you could guide, influence, and inspire others without conflict, defensiveness, or resistance? How would your relationships deepen if your presence, words, and energy naturally invited alignment? How would your career and impact transform if persuasion became effortless, authentic, and trusted? The truth is, persuasion without pressure is the culmination of all communication mastery. Listening, clarity, empathy, storytelling, emotional awareness, and presence converge to create influence that feels natural, compelling, and enduring. It is not manipulation, coercion, or force. It is connection, alignment, and resonance, the highest form of communication.
Have you ever felt the sting of betrayal or the frustration of realizing someone didn't truly understand or value you? Perhaps it was a friend who let you down, a colleague who misrepresented your ideas, or a partner whose words didn't match their actions. That sense of disconnection, suspicion, or doubt is the absence of trust, and it is the single greatest barrier to influence, connection, and fulfillment. Trust is not given lightly. It is earned, nurtured, and demonstrated through consistent action, integrity, and presence. Without trust, even the clearest words, the most persuasive stories, or the deepest empathy can fail. Communication without trust is noise. Influence without trust is manipulation. Relationships without trust are fragile and temporary. The first pillar of trust is authenticity. People sense when you are genuine, consistent, and transparent. Authenticity is not perfection. It is honesty and alignment between words, actions, and intentions. When your presence reflects truth rather than performance, others feel safe, understood, and valued. Trust grows naturally from this alignment. The second pillar is reliability. Words are promises, and follow-through turns promises into credibility. Showing up, delivering on commitments, and maintaining consistency in behavior signals dependability. Reliability builds confidence, reduces doubt, and creates a foundation where influence can thrive without coercion. Vulnerability is the third pillar. Many shy away from vulnerability, fearing judgment or exploitation. Yet when expressed thoughtfully, vulnerability is a profound bridge to connection. Sharing your struggles, admitting mistakes, or expressing authentic emotion signals humanity and courage. It allows others to relate, empathize, and reciprocate openness. Trust deepens when people see that you are real, fallible, and approachable. Transparency is another critical element. When intentions, expectations, and reasoning are clear, uncertainty diminishes. People resist manipulation, hidden agendas, or ambiguity. By communicating openly, explaining motives, and sharing thought processes, you invite trust rather than demanding it. Transparency reduces friction, suspicion, and misunderstanding, creating fertile ground for influence and collaboration. Empathy continues to play a central role. Trust flourishes when others feel seen, heard, and valued. Listening actively, validating emotions, and responding with understanding demonstrates respect and concern. It signals that relationships are not transactional, but rooted in mutual care and awareness. Influence grows when trust becomes the foundation of every interaction. Ask yourself, how often have relationships faltered not because of conflict, but because trust was absent? How often have ideas been rejected, advice ignored, or intentions doubted despite your sincerity? The difference between fleeting influence and enduring impact is trust. Trust transforms ordinary communication into connection, ordinary relationships into loyalty, and ordinary influence into lasting resonance. Consistency over time reinforces trust. Single gestures may create momentary goodwill, but enduring trust emerges from repeated demonstration of authenticity, reliability, and empathy. Every interaction, no matter how small, contributes to the perception of trustworthiness. Influence compounds when trust is established, creating a network of relationships where words carry weight and actions inspire confidence. Nonverbal communication also reinforces trust. Eye contact, open posture, steady tone, and congruent gestures signal transparency and sincerity. Misalignment between words and nonverbal cues erodes confidence. Alignment strengthens credibility. Trust is felt as much as it is recognized, and nonverbal cues communicate the invisible truth behind spoken words. Conflict, handled well, strengthens trust rather than undermining it. Open, honest, and respectful confrontation demonstrates integrity and courage. When disagreements are navigated with fairness, clarity, and empathy, trust deepens. People recognize that honesty and respect coexist, creating a safe environment where relationships survive challenges rather than crumble under them. Gratitude and acknowledgement are subtle but powerful tools for reinforcing trust. Recognizing contributions, expressing appreciation, and validating effort signal respect and awareness. It communicates that relationships are valued, not taken for granted. Trust is nurtured not only in critical moments, but also in daily acts of recognition and care. Ask yourself, how would your life change if every relationship, personal, professional, or casual, was built on trust? How would communication flow if skepticism, doubt, and defensiveness were replaced by confidence, openness, and mutual respect? How would your influence expand if people instinctively believed in your integrity and intentions? Trust also amplifies influence exponentially. When people trust you, your words carry authority without coercion. Your guidance is received openly. Your ideas are considered thoughtfully. Your presence alone creates credibility, creating opportunities that persuasion alone cannot achieve. Trust converts communication into leadership, empathy into loyalty, and advice into action. Imagine being a communicator whose words are consistently received as authentic, valuable, and trustworthy. Imagine influencing without pressure, connecting without effort, and inspiring without force. That is the power of trust. Every principle we have explored, listening, clarity, emotional awareness, empathy, storytelling, ethical persuasion, and presence, reaches its full potential only when grounded in trust. Building trust requires patience, consistency, and intention. It is not a tool for immediate gain, but an investment in enduring influence. Each interaction is an opportunity to reinforce credibility, demonstrate integrity, and deepen connection. Over time, trust becomes a force multiplier, magnifying your impact, strengthening relationships, and creating lasting resonance. Finally, consider the legacy of trust. People remember not just what you said, but how you made them feel, how reliable you were, and how safe they felt in your presence. Trust shapes reputations, opens doors, and creates networks of loyalty, respect, and collaboration. The communicator who masters trust leaves a lasting mark far beyond the words spoken in any single moment. Ask yourself, how committed are you to earning trust in every conversation, every relationship, and every interaction? How intentionally do you demonstrate authenticity, reliability, vulnerability, transparency, and empathy? Mastery of communication is inseparable from mastery of trust, because trust is the invisible currency that powers connection, influence, and transformation. The art of building lasting connections through trust is the culmination of everything we have explored. Listening, clarity, emotional awareness, empathy, storytelling, persuasion, and presence all converge when relationships are rooted in trust. Ordinary exchanges become profound connections. Ordinary influence becomes enduring impact, and ordinary communication becomes extraordinary, capable of transforming relationships, inspiring action, and leaving a legacy. Every conversation, meeting, and interaction is an opportunity. By cultivating listening, presence, emotional awareness, clarity, empathy, storytelling, persuasion, and trust, you transform communication from ordinary to extraordinary. The art of effective communication is not about talking more. It's about connecting deeply, influencing ethically, and leaving a lasting impression. Every word, every pause, every gesture matters. Commit to mastery. Practice intentionally. Reflect consistently. Your words can inspire, persuade, and transform,